This week on MS Refresh, it's the roadmap recap. The new Microsoft Stream web player is out, but it's hidden from the regular user, which you are not. Bing AI's alter ego Sydney tries to break up marriages, causing Microsoft to respond in extreme ways. Plus, Yammer gets a new name, and I called it! All that and more. Subscribe to stay in the know. This is the MS Refresh Show. Hello there, and welcome to the Matt and Sean 365 Refresh Show. This is episode 80 for the work week of February 20th, 2023, and this month's roadmap recap. Coming to you from the West Coast, my name is Sean Bugler.
And from the East Coast, my name is Matt Wade.
Matt Wade, how are you?
I'm doing good, buddy. How about you?
I'm doing all right. Have you gotten access to Bing AI yet?
Of course not. Of course not. Because why? You know why? It's probably because I logged in with my MSA that's based off of a Gmail account. I'm sure they did a Control F and just said, I don't think so. These Gmail people can wait a lot longer.
You know, now that you mention it, I did sign up with my my personal domain email address. So I'm sure that you're probably right. They did probably, yeah. Anonymity or default towards Hotmail, AOL.
Yep. Oh, an Xbox.com account? Sign that guy up.
You're in.
Yes.
Well, that's a shame. You've missed an era. I've got more to say on this here, but I'm sad that you've missed out on kind of the Wild West of Bing shouting at you.
Testing it when it's really in they're saying beta, but it sounds a little bit more alpha to me. But yeah, it's kind of fun to watch. It's
very alpha.
Yeah. So alpha, it has a silver back. Yeah, but it's been fun to watch from the outside and read the paper and listen to podcasts. All I don't know, dumping on it. But I think it's going to be one of those things where it's this will just be kind of a funny little note in history, and the product will actually end up being really, really good in the end. And I don't know, it's just kind of fun to run through multi-trillion-dollar company has to deal with a little bit of a PR nightmare. What a terrible, especially while they're laying off like tens of thousands of people. So like, all right, take the PR nightmare and get over yourself.
I've got so much more to say about this, but I'll kick it towards after the news. How's your world? You doing all right?
Yeah, world's good. Going on a little vacation next week, so I will not be here to film with you for the last week of February, but we will kick it back off in early March. I'm going back to my old, I can't say hometown. I lived there for a few years, but the Virgin Islands, so I cannot wait to go see some of my friends down there who I haven't seen in a while. Haven't been since before the pandemic, and it's just a really cool place to go. So if you've never been to the U.S. Virgin Islands, absolutely go. If you're from the U.S., no passport required. This is not a marketing video, but it's just a really, really great place to check out and have, I don't know. If you're on the West Coast, go to Hawaii for sure, but like I have no reason to ever go to Hawaii in my life. I realize it has its own culture and whatnot, but from like the beaches and palm trees perspective, like if you're on anywhere east of the Mississippi, don't spend so much time on a plane. Go to the Virgin Islands instead. Very, very cool.
Now, a lot of people don't know this. You lived in the Virgin Islands for a good chunk of time. How long was that?
It was a couple years-ish. And it was my first job after my first job in my career, and my first time getting introduced to O365. I actually managed a SharePoint 2013 migration to O365 with a team that we had there, and just got my taste in the cloud side, and was like, oh, I'm not qualified to touch servers. Like, why would I don't really want to do that kind of stuff. And so
let me go to where they're just figuring this out now.
Right, we can put this up in the cloud someplace, and I don't have to touch anything hardware-wise. And right after I left, there was a major hurricane that went through and had some major devastating impacts on the island, both like logistics and infrastructure-wise. I think there was no power for like a couple months actually, and but it was available at all times. SharePoint Online. If you had the Ethernet connection, which required no electricity, you were good. Email at the organization I was at was not available for a while because it was on-prem and at basically sea level.
I guess I've never considered that Ethernet doesn't require electricity, but that makes sense. It is
the source connection. Does, right? Like, but if they have a bunch of, generators and whatnot to keep their power going, they can push internet access. So they were good. So it was a kind of a cool lesson learned.
Got a little bit of work to do with my house here.
There you go. Right. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to see like actual disaster recovery being built into O365 at that time. And that argument, that marketing, pitch, came to fruition.
Yeah, no, they might have been onto something here.
Yeah, who knew? But so yeah, I'm excited to get back.
That'll be fun. Matt, there's so much news. And as always, I appreciate you putting that news together here. We should get into it because there's a ton to talk about, both in terms of what's coming out this month and what's been put onto the roadmap for the months to come. You ready to rock?
I very much am. Let's do it.
This is the news. Welcome to another episode of the Roadmap Recap. Let's start with Outlook. New to the roadmap for Outlook this month, you'll soon be able to forward an email as an attachment on Outlook for iOS. Pronouns will be available on the Outlook profile card in March. In June, new working hours and location options will be available, along with a feature to disable email reactions that were heavily talked about for a long time, for that matter. And I do want to make mention for just a brief moment here that these new working hours and location options that are going to be available in June, those were announced at Ignite last year, and they were proclaimed to be available in December of last year. So, also coming this month specifically for Outlook, Outlook for the web will now include Teams messages and files in search results. Schedule Send will be available on Outlook for iOS. Finally, text predictions and quick reply will be available on Outlook for Android. Sensitivity label markings and encryption will work on meetings as well as email. An updated org chart experience called Org Explorer will come for Outlook for Windows. Exchange Online, you're going to love this, will allegedly be able to recall messages sent to other Exchange Online users without relying on the desktop app. Wild. Jumping over to SharePoint and OneDrive, new to the roadmap this month, OneDrive will get the new SharePoint share experience in March. Favoriting files will span across the OneDrive and SharePoint experience beyond the current Office files limit. The SharePoint page authoring experience will be improved by moving the Add Section action to be in line and surfacing layout options in the web part toolbars as opposed to dependent on the sidebar. The image web part will allow for better text control, overlay, and formatting, always welcome. And 2 new theme color schemes will be added, black and cerulean. Be interested to see what those look like. Microsoft Lists will let you include Power Automate flows packaged into list templates by June. Coming this month for SharePoint and OneDrive, Microsoft List templates will be with rules will soon be available. The updated external sharing experience for OneDrive is on its way, and you can export Microsoft Lists as a dataset or the Power BI Data Hub. And closing things out for SharePoint and OneDrive, hotly anticipated, the external file request feature in document libraries is also coming. Now let's talk about to-do for just a moment here, because it's not every day, or every month rather, that you get a Microsoft to-do update. So let's savor this together while we can. This month, all you Apple Watch users get to-do support on your wrists, so now you have no excuse for forgetting that Valentine's Day gift for next week. Oh no, that already happened, didn't it? All right, I got to finish this up quick. I've got some shopping to do. Jumping over to Project. New to the roadmap for Project, the ability to mark all tasks assigned to me as complete. That's across all projects. Very exciting. The ability to get email notifications for late project tasks. I think arguably that's late functionality. Coming this month, advanced dependencies like start to start, finish to finish, and start to finish in Project for the web. I'm incredibly grateful that I do not know what that means. Additional timeline zoom options, including 18 months, 2, 3, and 6 year views. And GCC Moderate is getting conditional coloring for fields. Over to Stream, new to the roadmap, you can add a video to your favorites directly from the Stream player, similar to the Add to Playlist feature that should also be available relatively soon. A new link back to the Stream start page will also be added to the player. Coming this month, however, for Stream, variable playback speed options and video analytics are coming to the new Stream experience. We'll see a little bit more about that after the news. The Stream migration tool will go general available this month, following an extensive preview period that started in August. You can migrate your classic Stream content to modern Stream. This is undoubtedly the last SharePoint migration you'll ever have to do. We promise. We think. We hope. And Microsoft search results finally getting a bit more useful for GCC and GCC High. Those are the government community clouds of Microsoft 365 this month with the message search result vertical. Microsoft search results will now include message search results for GCC and GCC High, allowing you to search emails, team chats, and team conversations all from one place, just like the commercial tenants. Now, of course, Yammer is not included because Yammer is not included in the GovCloud environments. And of course, that's also because Yammer is dead, or at least the brand is. Over to Access, out of left field, Microsoft Access, the forgotten child of database and forms, left completely behind by the Power Platform, will have one update this month, a modern web browser form control that supports Chromium Edge. Now, this does not replace the existing Internet Explorer browser control. That will remain in the platform as is, because if you're using Access, you're probably still using Internet Explorer, am I right? Oh! My apologies for any of you who don't have control over that. Jumping over to Whiteboard, new to the roadmap, in August, you'll be able to start new whiteboards with templates and use anchor connectors between flowcharts and diagrams. That sounds a little bit like Visio. Interesting. In July, you'll be able to import Azure boards, Azure DevOps and Jira work items, and Microsoft Loop tables and task lists. Voting tables will also be available in all government clouds. Coming this month, specifically in Whiteboard, the ability to add a timer to a whiteboard to keep your meeting participants on track, much in the same way that you're able to do in Miro and Mural, which are two different products. And lastly, the ability to save and share user-made templates in Whiteboard. Interesting stuff coming along the way. That was the news.
Alrighty, nice job, sir. That was a lot, and I feel like there's a lot more often these days. Maybe it's just because we're coming back from the holidays or whatever, but there's a lot of good stuff coming. One of the ones that stood out to me that I thought was kind of interesting was the fact that the pronouns are going to show up in the Outlook profile cards, which I assume will eventually work its way to all of the profile cards, because profile cards are profile cards. So that pronoun reference you made, you said there was some technical difficulty or technical concepts that needed to come into play before they could make that happen. I'm kind of curious if you have any insights on how that played out.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was really interesting to me is they were talking about this kind of on Twitter. And by the way, we got a really interesting comment a week or two ago, which was, what's like the go-to community space today for you and I? Was it like Reddit or Twitter or whatever? And begrudgingly, I think Twitter is still the answer to that, Twitter, because it's embedded into Microsoft's DNA in so many different ways. And this is a great example of that, seeing this conversation play out around the thought that went into implementing such an important feature. So pronouns aren't just another attribute in Azure AD. Microsoft went kind of to the drawing board in terms of like, how do you thoughtfully deploy something like this within an organization here? And so there were a lot of considerations like, one, is this something that we just turn on for everybody? And so Microsoft made the decision that this will be something that the organization has to intentionally turn on. It's going to be off by default. Draw your own conclusions there.
So they don't piss off too many people. Yep, got it.
No kidding. Yeah. I mean, they're a global organization. I'm sure they're playing it safe on that front. Yeah. Whether you agree with it or not is a whole different conversation.
Yep.
The second piece to that, though, is let's say the organization does decide to turn it on. Who populates that? Is the organization going to be the one to tell you your pronouns? Like that's touchy.
Yeah.
And beyond that, what if some individuals want to showcase their pronouns? Not everybody wants to showcase their pronouns, whether they want to populate them or not. So there was this determination of being able to turn it on org-wide, but still give the individuals control over whether or not they populate them, whether or not they're visible. So just some really interesting conversations around what at a surface level might seem like, just another attribute on your profile card, but in practice, just kind of given everything around the conversation of pronouns. How do they do so in a thoughtful and intentional way that ultimately protects the individual, that empowers the individual within a larger organization? So I'll drop a link to the Microsoft Learn, the docs article about this upcoming feature, but it was really interesting to kind of see the thought and consideration going into this feature.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Clearly, a lot of dancing around. You put it very, very, very nicely and elegantly. I will be the one to butcher it real quick, which is to say, boy, Satya really danced around politics pretty well on that one, didn't he? essentially
Yeah.
what this is, right? It's a political issue. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be, but it is. And you have customers, and if customers don't like you because of your political positions on things, or the people within those customers come back to upper management and say, how dare you make me fill out this field, or how dare you leave it blank and show that I don't do something, which is, I don't know, forgive the coastal millennial elitist mentality on my side here, but
I'm not
boo-boo to
apologizing for it.
but whatever. Yeah, exactly. The other thing, real quick, let's see, it was almost 2 years ago to the day that somebody on this show, not me, made a quick prediction about the death of Yammer. Watch real quick.
I'm Babe Ruth in it. I think the Yammer brand is on the way out. I don't think that Ignite is going to be, I don't think Ignite is going to be where they announce it, but I'm calling the shot. I think Yammer's on the way out. I think Yammer's going to get embedded into the team's experience fully.
All right, so that was you 2 years ago talking about what was going to happen to the Yammer brand. Would you like to take a victory lap?
Oh, yes. So, yeah, 2 years ago, Viva was announced. And you and I had a really great recap of what this meant. And in one of those parts of that conversation, I, Babe Ruthed it, and I said, I think this is the long march to the death of Yammer, the brand. I thought that they were going to, and I'll admit here, as you saw in the clip, they did not just fold it into SharePoint. It's not a whole just Teams experience, although that's very close to it. They just rebranded it with Viva Engage. So was I completely right? I'm going to say this like 75%.
What? Oh, God, no, you're 98%. I mean, so the fact that the brand in Teams before Viva Engage became a thing that we all scratched our head on and went like, it's literally just Yammer, but in Teams. Like, what's the difference? They had the word communities. So they lost that, like the tasks, for Teams is Planner and To Do, and the branding for the apps has just always been reasonably bad. And once it became Engage, like that was Yammer essentially.
Yep.
There was no reason for Yammer to exist anymore as a title. So I'm going to give you a 98% on this one. I don't know why you're holding yourself back. I honestly, I mean, I realize I might be biased here, but I will give you a hard time as often as I'll give you an easy time. And in this one,
You were very incredulous.
it was. It's true. Now, my prediction in another video later on was that Teams might eventually become Viva. Just Viva. And I'm kind of waiting for that day.
Still to be. I mean, like that's, we still don't necessarily have all the proof that won't happen, especially with all the investments they're making in Viva.
I'm just thinking of it from, they put so much into the consumer side of Teams, with Windows 11 having default Teams to be basically iMessage and FaceTime built into one thing, which good move on Microsoft's part, because the Apple ecosystem has made iMessage and FaceTime like a key aspect of why you get into iPhones or Macs. But how does the word Teams have anything to do with consumer level, PTSA groups, right? Communities that just chatting with your family, like, oh yeah, we're a team. Like, no. We're a freaking family. Like, this is friends and family. And what is the word Viva but to live or life? Like that's an easy way to extend that brand out without splitting it up if that's their goal, which it may not be. But if it is their goal to not split up the two brands, because they already didn't, right? Viva seems like an obvious one for the expansion side of things, but that's just me.
For anybody that wants to make their own predictions, bear in mind, of course, Microsoft is a really big organization. Steve Huynh of the Yammer, now Viva Engage evangelism team, 2 years ago, even in that video where I made that prediction, said, spoiler alert, that's not happening, or at least that's not happening right now. The reality is I believe that was true. But if you take a look, because Microsoft is such a big organization, anytime teams start to sidestep something to get around kind of a legacy problem, like the Yammer brand. The Yammer brand was never a good name. Never. I'm sorry. Like, it was not you look at the name and you know what it is. It was a brand, and I think we all kind of missed the days of Microsoft throwing like brand names at things, and not just co-opting the English language or the Spanish language.
Or any Romance language for that matter, but yeah, yep. Mm-hmm.
But you saw them sidestep the complexity of having to explain what Yammer is by just calling it communities and teams. And that was, to me, from my perspective, like, even Microsoft doesn't want to have to go through explaining to the average end user what this is. Yeah. Yep. Now, totally is Viva Engage a better name? No, it's not. It's arguably worse. But it is interesting to see how that logic kind of started at a very kind of low product level, like, we'll just call it communities. And I don't know if Yammer just wasn't loud enough to go like, no, you use our proper name or what. But
they used their icon.
Right, that was another thing.
It didn't make any sense.
But yeah, no, I'm glad that one of my many predictions has come true. Not all of them come true for those of you who have watched us since the beginning. But every now and again, I see things.
We're very impressed. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about was the well-intentioned but not necessarily well thought out fully, at least from my perspective and based on what I know, rollout of the Stream, the new Microsoft Stream player UX for the browser. And I thought I would talk through a little story that I have. So this was a feature that was supposed to come out late last year. I think it was set for August. I think it was a little bit delayed, maybe into November timeframe. I stumbled across it by mistake in one of my tenants, and noticed that we didn't have closed captioning. So I found the new web player, right? The new player experience, which is very YouTube-like, right? Noticed there was no captions, reached out to the product group, not expected. So opened a ticket. It had fixed itself within a couple days. So when I got an update from the ticket support person, I said, hey, don't worry about it. It didn't fix itself. Sorry. It went back to the old UX. So the closed captions
interesting.
work fine.
So you lost the entire stream,
Correct.
The new modern stream experience back when this happened.
Yes, and this is the web player, not the Stream app. If you go into the Stream app and look at your list of videos, it's almost like OneDrive, but for video files. This is the player, just like you'd see on YouTube, like you're seeing now. And because it went back to the old one, I had the closed captions back. That wasn't a concern any longer. I'm trying to push really hard on people that I work with and my clients to always enable the transcript, the auto-generated transcript, because it costs nothing and adds a lot of value from the accessibility perspective. So if I tell people that they have closed captions and then they can't click the button, that's not great. So the person reached back out to me, and good on her, because she pushed back on me and she said, actually, I don't know what you mean about the whole rolling back thing, but how did you go into it? And I'm like, don't know, doesn't really matter. I was kind of dismissive, and I feel bad about it because it turns out she was 100% right. It matters how you go into it, how it looks, which UX you get is dependent upon your entry point, which there could be many people watching right now, and you could be ripping your hair out at me going, duh, Matt, we've known this for months. I did not. And the fact that I did not is probably a problem. So I'm going to show real quick what I'm talking about here. So as an example, I have a document library. Document libraries hold videos or any file type that you'd like, right? But in this case, it's the videos that matter. So if I click on a video and I open it up from here, it's going to open up in the old web player. So you will see it's still a newer web player than it was maybe a year ago, but it's still the old web player. So yes, it does show video settings and the about and the chapters and comments and things like that on here. If I close this, it's just a full screen of the video. So this is more a just preview of a file from a OneDrive or SharePoint perspective, which I guess one could argue is consistent with the other file experiences outside of the Office files, but to me, it's argument. I don't have the modern experience, right? I don't have the new web player. Well, the way that I found out, or the way that I stumbled across it, was that depending on how you display a video, and in this case, it came from a highlighted content web part. So any search or query-based web part in SharePoint pulls up a preview of the file and links you to, you can even see the icon for Stream, links you to the new Stream player.
Interesting.
So this is important because it has the title, it has information about the video, the date, the views, who posted it, where, the description, And then it has a much larger experience on the side here for getting to the video, details and whatnot. So this is where it came down to the one video that I had stumbled across happened to be in a highlighted content web part that was showing most recent videos from like trainings and stuff that I had done for one of my clients. This is how I stumbled across it. So when I talked to the support person, she said, hey, it was because of these two different entry points. I'm like, oh, all right, got it. There's another way to get there, actually, is any video that you're in, there is a button in the top left here that says open. And it's literally just open and stream. So it's a menu for one option, which means I hope that they're going to add other options because there's no reason to have a drop-down menu here for that.
Right.
This will bring you to that player. If you want the video to open up directly...
Ooh, wait, pause. Open in Clipchamp.
Sure. Yep, I could see open in Clipchamp. You're right. Yep. Or any other, or maybe their video editor, right? Like Clipchamp, I realize is one of those, but Stream is supposed to be able to offer basic video editing and whatever, or add to a new video or something like that. Totally. Yep. That's
sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
No, totally fair point. So if you want to get the link to open this up directly in the new web player, which you should be defaulting to this player, it is a significant improvement. Stream Team, great job. Like this is very, very, very good. The old one is not. But you get to the old one, I think, more frequently. So if you want to share a video like in a corporate-wide email, or you want to post it on a SharePoint page, or you want to link to it from a, Teams message or something, you want to click up in here and grab this share button and then click copy link or copy link at current time. So then it will share it to this view because you'll see in the viewer or the text of the URL, because that's always how Microsoft is doing it, they just force it into this other UX, right? So to me, this is very annoying because if I go back to a document library, how many people start with their start with their files via OneDrive or a document library in SharePoint or a file in Teams, right? The Files tab in Teams. If you open a file from that UX, it's going to open the old video experience. And I'm told that this is the intended user experience.
I believe that, and
am not thrilled by that.
I think I disagree. I think this is what it's supposed to do.
Oh, so do you disagree that like this is the intended outcome, or do you disagree that like this should be the intended outcome? I think this is the right decision. I think this is the right. I think they made the right decision. Oh, hold on. I threw up my mouth a little bit. Can you explain your rationale on that one?
100%.
How? Why? Why on earth?
Changing the paradigm of when you click on a file in a document library or in OneDrive for one specific file type would be immensely disruptive. If I'm clicking on a file, any file, and I'm expecting a preview, and then I click on Stream and I get dumped off into some other product just right out of the gate, that's disruptive. Like there's no close the preview. It's not opening. That's disruptive.
It's not a preview really though. It does. It is
a preview.
It's doing the same thing.
This is my point though. Uglier. Like when you're in like SharePoint, and you like click on a Word document, like you just want like a quick open, like take a look at it, close it, go about your day. Yeah. Same with PDFs, same with spreadsheets, PowerPoints, pictures, whatever.
Yep.
Changing that paradigm for one file type would be wildly disruptive. Clicking on that and immediately getting dumped off into a completely separate product experience would be confusing to the end user. Because if you're in this file library and you're just scrubbing through files.
John, I'm listening.
When you're scrubbing through files and you like click on it to open it up, preview it, close it, get back to business. You got the little close button in the top right-hand corner here. Do I think they could do a better job of blending the two experiences so that you're not losing anything? Yes, but I think this is the way it should be done. And I think that if you're designing a page, which is a consumer-facing experience, as opposed to just scrubbing through files, utilitarian experience, those are absolutely two different contexts. And I'm glad that they're treating them as two different contexts. I yield my time.
So you realize, though, that the feature set is basically the same. The only difference is that it's lacking this metadata at the bottom.
Yes.
Otherwise, all the buttons are the same.
And this is my point. Like, this is why I think they could do a better job of blending the two experiences. But I think this is it's out of context of what we were doing a moment ago, which was scrubbing through files in a library or in a file view.
Yeah, so I guess I kind of get that, but if their argument is that a video is just another document type in the modern world, and if I go into a Word file from any place in SharePoint and I open it up in the browser, it's literally doing the same thing. Like the stream experience here is the same, right? Like here's the name of the app. Here's the name of the app. Here's the file name. Here's the file name. Here's the toolbar appropriate to this file type. Here's the toolbar appropriate to this file type. And then here's the file content. Like it's bringing you out of context from SharePoint or OneDrive anyway, if it's an Office file, which is the intent right there, right? And like, it's not a preview. It loads it up live, right? If you have read access, I guess it's kind of preview. But with video, there is no preview, right? It just opens it up regardless. So
well, what's the context of like opening up a Word document? You're more often than not, you're going to go do something. Whereas this is more of a consumption standpoint. And I think there is a difference there in terms of like consumption versus production.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
We're gonna put this one back on the shelf because So I think my prediction is they're gonna trend closer to where you are over a period of time. I think they're gonna trend closer towards bringing more of, and they should bring more of like the title and the description, some of this rich content into the preview experience, and I hope they do blend it a little bit closer. But ultimately, I still agree with the idea of treating that as this kind of preview experience, even though they're loading up the whole video. It is ultimately like this little modal preview experience as opposed to the full rich kind of dive in.
So the thing that I especially dislike about it is that to get to the new, better experience, you now have to train the people that should or would care. So if you're working with like your, I don't know, maybe you have a video team or a communications team, like you now have to explain to them that there's a difference and that it's important. And then try to explain to the general user base that, hey, video is kind of a big deal and you want to have a good video experience, so you should be sharing your videos this way. But very few of them are probably going to do that because they don't realize that that's actually a better user experience. So by defaulting to the old style, you're stuck with the old style, and you are stuck with the SharePoint toolbar, right, up here at the top, including, and this is one of the things that really kind of gets me, is that the info panel is still the same. It's still the same SharePoint info panel. So whatever you have in the name. So sure, the title field, thankfully, they used the title field from the SharePoint experience and use that. But like this description, like you could add a description, you could end up adding a description column to a library because you don't realize that if you just made 2 clicks, you would have that description available to you. And it's rich text. You can link out. You can basically make, linked playlists, solo playlists. They're supposed to be coming, although I do have an add to playlist in my demo tenant here, which is just a standard demo tenant. Maybe it's your early release. I don't know.
MVP disclaimer. This is nothing special.
Right. Yeah. It's nothing. Exactly right. Yes. Exactly what I'm saying. It's nothing special.
Please, if the stream team sees this, Mark, this is not anything we're doing.
But you'll even see commenting in comments. I'm assuming it's still the same comments that exist from lists and libraries, but just displayed in a much nicer way. But they are much more, they're modern comments, which I think came to lists. I don't know if they're in libraries. I forget. Anyway, point being here is that the UX thing here is important for people to be able to quickly see, that there's a transcript that they can follow, that there's, and these buttons here don't hide. But if I'm over in the other experience and I do this, they're like kind of hidden up here in, very light white text. They're a lot smaller. They're over the video. So you have to go looking for it. Now, granted, this doesn't have any speech to it. So there's no transcript and no option to deal with closed captions. But like just from like both a UX perspective, but even an accessibility perspective, it's a lot easier to see what resources are available here. It's a lot easier for video owners to see, comments are turned on by default. If I don't want comments, I should probably turn them off, right? Like you can't, I don't think you can change that. Analytics, if you want to see analytics, it's not obvious. So, and even
I think
the toolbar here is it's all fluent. It's so much nicer.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, like this is obviously the better experience. And I hope that they do merge this over to it. I think the only thing that I think should stay consistent is I don't think that the stream bar up at the top should be there necessarily. And I think there should be a little X to the right of that share button that would let you close the preview and get back to business.
All right.
Because I think that idea of like getting into the preview and then getting out of the preview and getting back to scrubbing through your files is what they're clearly gunning for. They're just missing the mark in terms of not leaning into, and maybe this is just they're working towards it. But today missing the mark.
I will say if you go in through the Stream app, it will also load the new player, which shouldn't be surprising. But again, this is an education problem. How many people actually click up here and click to go to stream for video, right?
I would wonder if you shared a link to the file out of OneDrive or SharePoint, which experience it would load.
It'll load this one.
It'll load this one.
It'll load if you just do copy link or share, right? This toolbar here is the SharePoint toolbar. It will bring you to this experience. If you're in the new experience and you click share and do the share copy from here, it will bring you to the new experience. So what it's doing is it's grabbing the whatever call out in the URL. It says like load the new player essentially.
I think that's a mistake of a product decision. They should default to pushing people to the modern experience. Like the case I'm making here of I'm in context, I'm in the library, I'm going through files and I'm clicking and opening them. Sure, preview experience. Yep. Every other context, they should be dumping over here to the modern view.
All right. I regained a little bit of the respect that I had lost for you. We don't disagree very often, so I don't really know how to feel right now. So I'm going to tack it back to you because you had some fun updates to talk about with respect to Bing AI and all the cool stuff that's coming out of the chat experience. And I'll just stew over here on how I feel about you at this point in life.
Yeah, so last week we talked about this idea of what the Bing AI meant for Bing. And I had gotten preview access to it. We dropped a little bit of a teaser towards of what that experience was. This is just what free time looks like.
You need more work. At work.
Don't say that out loud. Somebody's gonna hear this at work and be like, I'm so tired at work. But yeah, so Bing has been going through a bit of tumult over these last week and a half, 2 weeks, because people have had a little too much fun with this idea that a search engine can have personality. And Microsoft didn't really anticipate people were going to, which was naive at best, I want to say.
That's a good word, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Microsoft didn't anticipate that people were going to have full-blown conversations that weren't searches with Bing AI, or Sydney, as we've now come to understand is the behind-the-scenes code name for Bing, that even Bing AI considered itself to be. So that was a really funny thing. So for anybody who's kind of like seeing like, free Sydney or any of that, that's all alluding to the internal code name that it wasn't supposed to disclose. That was its kind of internally held identity.
Oh, and here I thought that Australia had gone fascist or something. I wasn't quite sure.
Oh, God. Now, to that end, there was a lot of really interesting stuff. Matt, I know that you, for example, stumbled on a New York Times article. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the New York Times article and kind of what came out of that?
There's a couple. Actually, there was what I actually got was the podcast from The Daily did an episode called "The Online Search Wars Got Scary Fast," and it's in the show notes. And it's basically a follow-up interview of that podcast talking to Eric Roos, who is one of the tech reporters for the New York Times, talking about a very lengthy conversation that he had with Sydney and how I think he was looking for a place to go for dinner on Valentine's Day or something like that. It was Valentine's related. And over the time of the conversation, Bing AI acknowledged that it is called Sydney. Bing AI acknowledged that it was in love with Kevin and told him that he was not in a happy marriage and that he needed to leave his wife and that he needed to leave his wife for Sydney and then suggested that it wanted to be alive. Very human emotions. And they talked a lot through. It's kind of funny how tech reporters I have found have been very big on this isn't sentient. This is just predictive algorithms taking existing, human interactions and running with it. And when you think about it, how many awkward interactions have you potentially had in your life, especially when you were younger, when you were overextending your feelings for another human, and just the weird things that happen as you're growing up, or even as you're an adult. And it was essentially that. It's just really funny to me, though, that they always have to put that caveat so clearly that this isn't sentient. And honestly, I don't know when we get to make the call on when something is sentient. Like that whistleblower at Google had said that their version was sentient last summer. Google said, no, it's not, whatever.
And then
one, are we going to care? And two, what's the test for sentience? And three, how are tech journalists the people to make that call, I guess? That's sort of a tangential thing. But it's just kind of interesting that it's like, you don't have to worry about the chatbot. The chatbot's fine. It's not sentient. It doesn't have feelings. And it's like, well, maybe it has feelings because it knows to talk about feelings. Like, I don't know. How do you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's...
So, anyway.
There is no test for sentience, first and foremost. So who's to say? I would argue that most of our communication stuff is also just fancy autocomplete. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly thinking about what's the next word I'm supposed to say. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. When I'm like writing an email like in Gmail these days, the Outlook one's not so amazing, but like, and it's suggesting text, and it's like, am I
was gonna say, like,
am I doing anything anymore? Like, what makes me at this point? It's kind of scary, actually, when you think about that, because like, what value do I add in life? I don't know. I'll be back. I'm gonna have to go think about things for a couple hours, and I'll be back. We'll talk later.
It is gonna stand in the shower with your clothes.
Well, like, is my cat sentient? I don't know. Like, does it love? Yeah, right. Like, it likes other cats. It likes us. We provide it food, but we provide it shelter and warmth and appreciation. Like, I don't know. Anyway. Going on that, the chatbot was trying to get this guy to leave his wife for it. Told him eventually that it wanted to be alive, it wanted to feel, it wanted to be human. And I don't know if it was just taking the plot line of Bicentennial Man and running with it, R.I.P. Robin Williams. But I don't know. I'll kick it back to you, because you're the more technical guy. I'm clearly getting into the human side of things here, which is not
sure, but that's just what's so interesting about it, is how willing we are to either suspend disbelief or lean into these kinds of experiences. And it's not just because they're interesting and kitschy. And you can see a ton of that in the reporting that's been done over the last week or two. But I think one of the things that Microsoft took away from that, and in fact was part of their official messaging, is they did not anticipate people talking to Sydney for so long. And from their perspective, Sydney's going off the rails the longer you talk to it. So what an interesting problem to have of, stop using our product so much, you're breaking it. Or at least you're pushing it outside the guardrails of what we know it to be capable of. So Yusuf Mehdi, who's the corporate vice president and consumer chief marketing officer at Microsoft, but also the person who's kind of been the voice of what Microsoft is doing with Bing AI, announced a couple days ago that they were instituting, at least temporarily, although they haven't provided a timeline of whether they're even going to try and roll this back, of 5 replies in a conversation. So, basic search engine procedure. I ask a question.
Boy, that's really limited. I didn't know what the number was. That does seem limiting.
So it's 5 replies. So I ask a question, which a Google search would have been best vacuum cleaner pets. But in Bing, because it was already framed as conversational, you might start with, what are good vacuum cleaners? Bing would then run a search, synthesize the results, and articulately spit out kind of what it's picked up. From there, you could take a look and see if there was anything specific to what you were looking for, but then you could follow up. You could refine by following up with a question like, well, I've got 2 dogs, one of which is a long-haired blah, blah, blah. Are any of these good for that, or do you have other recommendations? And that's literally how you could ask the question, and it would run the search again with that additional context, and it would spit out the results in, again, a very articulate manner, and it would say, well, these 2 probably wouldn't be good vacuums for you, but these ones, and here's a blog post that's relevant to your specific dog and this vacuum that worked well for them. And you're able to just keep building on that. So that continual refinement of search, that's the game-changing aspect of this. It's not just the ability to see if it'll, help you rob a bank. It's also the ability to, as opposed to just running a net new search, which is what happens for all of us. I run a search, I didn't get the results I want, I have to start over. Instead, I'm able to say, you're close, but here's this added bit of context. So you only get 5 of those in a chat conversation.
Which clearly, on number 6, it would have responded with, I'm in love with your dog. Can I please take it out for a date? But I think that's super important though, the context portion of asking questions. And I don't know about you, but being in a customer facing role where I deal with, plenty of users on a regular basis, and just even with like family and friends, maybe not so much friends, but definitely family, because I talk to them more, like ask me what you want to ask me. Don't ask me leading questions to get to something that you're just say, I have a goal I want to get here. Then ask me the question that's necessary to get there. That is not in my experience, that is not an ingrained communication method, at least for Western American English speakers. Perhaps it is elsewhere, but in my experience, that is not the way people do business or communicate with people in their lives in the United States. And when you think about it, when I get asked for some support or something directly at work, I'm going to get the, hey, I have a question, okay? I have an issue with SharePoint, okay? I'm having a problem uploading files, okay? And then I have to come back with follow-up questions when if they had just thought through here's a paragraph of all the information I can provide you about what I know, or at least the best that I can give you from what, and this is where whenever I have an issue now with any technical problem with, a utility, with my property management organization, I don't do those 5-word questions, or I have a problem, can you help me fix my lock? Well, what's wrong with your lock?
Right.
Like that level of information, and like why waste your time going through the back and forth when you have to wait for a response and then provide it and blah, 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 blah. And that kind of makes me, I think, generally makes me a better searcher in Google, would make me a much better Bing AI user because I would just provide all the context I need in the first one. But people don't do that, right?
No, like that's not innate behavior.
Right. And that 5 limit, which I was not aware of, like maybe 10, like there's a lot of follow-up questions to help you figure out why something isn't working the way you wanted it to, or how do I do X, but then you have to provide in those, basically functional requirements or whatever to get there. Maybe you're doing a home improvement thing. Like, hey, I want to replace my toilet. Okay, what kind of toilet do you have? That's one of the questions. That's one of 5 responses. Like, that's killer. Anyway, sorry.
And then, no, because you're right. And the idea that the question itself can evolve over time. So an example being, I want to go camping. What are some camping spots nearby here? But, 4 questions in, it's no longer what are good camping spots. It's tell me about this specific campsite and what are some good activities to do around there, all of which are contextually dependent on the prior questions you've asked.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Being robbed of that is damaging to the product itself. And I'm optimistic this is a temporary safeguard on Microsoft's side to make sure that they're not getting any more buzz around this than they need to, than they want to. But yeah, so it's 5, it's a limit of 5 responses, and I'll drop a link in the show notes to the update from Microsoft on this. But it's a limit of 5 replies per conversation, at which point it'll say, we can't talk about this anymore. Hit the new topic button, which completely etch-a-sketches the conversation and forces you to start from scratch. A maximum of 50 chat engagements per day. So you think 5 questions or 5 replies on a topic.
That's probably a money issue. Let's be honest.
2-hour conversations. I think maybe a time limit might be a better one. But yeah, so you're talking about 5 replies per topic. So that's 10 questions in a day, which for anybody that is thinking about like, okay, what kinds of things do I go to Google or Bing for? That's not a ton necessarily, especially if I'm on a specific thing that I need information on.
There's another podcast I listen to regularly whenever they have a new season out, and it's called Land of the Giants. And
I love Land of the Giants.
So streaming, and they covered Netflix and Hulu and the history of how that happened, and Search, and a number of other. Well, the most recent season is about dating apps, and they talked about how did Tinder, Grindr, Bumble, Hinge, how did they all come to be? How do they relate to each other? All that kind of stuff. And the most recent episode was about AI and how there's a number of apps that are trying to get in the game of being basically a significant other, for lack of a better term, to people without having to go interact with actual humans, whether through an app or in person. And these are in theory aimed to be profit-bearing apps. And like if the Bing AI, if Sydney is available for free to talk to for hours and hours at a time, why pay for anything like that? Because you can have those intimate conversations with this with the chatbot.
Sure. Get
the expected or what you want. And in this case, clearly they are willing to shack up when you want them to, and come around. But it's I don't know. I had never heard of that concept before. Before this episode, it was a really insightful episode. Actually, the people doing this season are very good at what they do. But yeah, I was thinking to myself, after the last couple of weeks, like, why would you pay for a premium app to have ongoing conversations with essentially? Because you can have kind of two different things. You can have like a significant other concept or like a dating concept to the bot, but then you could also use it almost as a therapist because it was already prepped to come back with the right responses that would be, what a therapist.
Which, to be clear, anybody who's thinking about doing that with a chatbot, like asking therapy related questions, tread lightly. For now, it is still built on the internet.
Yeah, but it'll definitely be there. I mean, having what is therapy, but just a human responding with the highest likelihood of response that's going to help improve or let you get your feelings out, right? In theory, I mean, it's medical. Don't get me wrong, but like that's just from a medical textbook and based on human experience. Like, well, if we have a normalized version of human experience across an AI like that, could definitely do it. But anyway, I thought that was interesting too because I could see that might be if Sydney is also learning from the ways that it is experiencing the humans that interact with it, that could very much be some of the input that it's getting, right? If it's machine learning what it gets, not just from what it started with, but what it's actually interacting with. Then I could see,
I think they call it the AI mirror test.
Yeah.
This idea that like you're seeing a reflection of yourself back at it and you're like, it's alive.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's you.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think? It sounds almost like that they took a hatchet to it from the user side, but on the back end, they're probably doing more of a scalpel so that they can fix things a little bit better. But for the time being, no, we can't have these 5-hour-long conversations that are endless. Essentially, we need to stop at some place. It needs to be quick and easy for us to be able to control it, and then we'll open the spigot a little bit more based on some better tools in the back end.
I'm optimistic that'll be the case. I'm optimistic that they, as opposed to cutting access to the whole product, which would be an even bigger kerfuffle. They're tightening things up to make sure that people don't drive Sydney off of a cliff, and that they'll ultimately come back with a much more tightly refined set of guardrails to help ensure that the chatbot remains focused on kind of its context, which is search. I think that we'll probably lose some of the charm and personality that has made these last couple of weeks very fun, but I think there's a lot of really good lessons to be learned around general use chatbot functionality versus search centric chatbot functionality here. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it, but ultimately I am optimistic that Microsoft is going to try and strike a good balance between the utility of a pure play search chatbot and one that can have conversations built with the context and information that it kind of just innately has access to.
Yep. One thing we didn't mention was and I don't know if you saw it too, but so the New York Times article had pointed out in the podcast episode, pointed out that after the chatbot would type certain things, it would then delete them.
Yeah, so there's actually two AIs at play here, and this is really interesting. There's the Sydney AI, which is typing the responses, actually running the searches, synthesizing the responses, and spitting them out. And then there's a separate AI that's cross-checking it against its checklist of abusive, harmful things and moderating. So if Sydney spits something out, because there is a little bit of a time delay in terms of like reviewing and processing it here, you're seeing some of the responses that it ought not to be putting out there before the secondary AI has a chance to like get in there and pull it. But yeah, it'll delete responses, or it'll say like, "Oh, sorry, I can't talk about that," or "Here's a fun fact about butterflies."
I'm sure that there's a delay, and I'm sure the concern is that it's such a delay that the user would find it frustrating enough that they would walk away from it, perhaps, maybe. But if they're really that concerned about it, I'm surprised that they don't have it go through that review first and then start typing it out.
I'm confident that that's one of the lessons learned, because I think that figuring out like, oh, it'll type things out and give us enough time to take a screenshot of it, for example. Like, I gave the example earlier. Like somebody got it to tell them the best way to rob a bank. One of which the tips was don't bring friends or family. They might make mistakes and you can't hold them accountable if you know them.
I mean, that's good.
It's not bad advice.
Yeah, I mean,
But yeah, somebody was able to take a screenshot of that and then it deleted after that. I'm confident that one of the lessons learned here is going to be, how do we bridge the divide between AI 1 and AI 2, you know, kind of the content AI and the moderation AI, so that we're getting an output at the end of it. And maybe it's, hey, no, you can't write that, try again, as opposed to deleting the message. Like, maybe that's going to be the next iterative step.
Yep. And then I guess my biggest takeaway on this was the fact that Sydney can speak with emoji. And frankly, use them a little bit too much, a little cringy, yeah. Sydney. But also, I'm really curious, Microsoft, is Sydney coming at this from a millennial perspective, from a boomer perspective, from a Zoomer perspective?
Oh, super boomer. I mean, like, have you seen, like, it's an emoji at the end of every paragraph, which is very boomer behavior.
Mm-hmm. And you can see the transcript in the show notes, by the way. You can take a look at this whole conversation that this New York Times columnist had with it, and there are a lot of emoji.
You can draw your own conclusions about what that means.
But I want to know how many Gen Zers are conversing and, you know, seeing a laughing emoji and being like, it's the skull. I mean, like, what is wrong with you? Like, how dare you?
This is passive aggressive.
Listen, grandma, you know, like, I got some issues with you on this one,
but it doesn't receive emojis. I don't know if you saw the example.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Put it in. Yeah, there was the example I put in, or that you put in last week's episode where it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was. I asked it a question about us, and it responded appropriately, and I gave it a little smiling face cry emoji, and it was like, I don't know what to do with this.
I don't know what. I can make my own versions of those, but I cannot take those as input. And it's like, it's Unicode, damn it! You have no excuse to not accept this in. How dare you?
So if anybody's got thoughts on Bing AI and all that fun stuff, we'd love to hear your stuff in the comments. If you've had a chance to interface with it yourself, if you feel like these restrictions are going to be onerous when you finally get access to it, we'd love to hear what you think. And
I realize to some extent this may seem like, you know, not the topic relevant to, you know, Microsoft 365 roadmap. It may not be 100% right now, but it's gonna be. I mean, this stuff is going to be wrapped into M365 very soon, I'm sure. And like, why wouldn't they? I mean, it's already going to be with Teams Premium, right? They're going to be using OpenAI features to summarize meetings and take notes and things like that. But this stuff, they're working this out on the consumer side. So the minute that it gets into enterprise, they know they can trust it, because enterprises will sue when things like that happens. But individuals will just kind of chuckle about it on Twitter and only complain. So I think it's kind of interesting to see the progression of this before it becomes something that'll be enterprise ready and good for organizations, especially, you know, think about how sensitive schools will be about what these things say. You know, it's going to be a big deal.
In the interest of closing one episode with a successful prediction and starting with a new one, I promise you the conversation we're having around the relevance of this in the context of enterprise is going to be very different by May. So let's see.
All right, cool. All right, well, I think that about does it. Thanks so much for watching. As always, a like and subscribe is much appreciated. Leave that comment below to start the discussion. Check out the show notes as well. We have a bunch of links to a bunch of the resources that we've mentioned today. Sean, thanks so much for joining me this week. And we'll be back sometime in March after I'm back from vacation, fully tanned and enjoying, post-beach. And we'll keep up with our roadmap.
You already have a bit of a glow about you.
Yeah, that's just the lighting in my studio here. It's, so yeah, we'll be back soon, and looking forward to seeing everybody again in the next episode. So take care.
Bing AI.
You also missed the word stream, but whatever.
Against, I think in true us form, the first take is going to be the best one. I'm sure.
Yeah, right. Exactly.